Hi, my name's Anthony, and today on Playtest we're going to be going over the Black Grail from Trench Crusade. In this video, we're going to be going over the Black Grail's strengths and weaknesses, analyzing each unit and going over their effectiveness on the battlefield, taking a look at their warband variants, and at the end I'll show you the fully kitted unit that I can't play without. And just to mention, this is based on the 1.6.3 rule set. First off, the Black Grail is a defensive troop. What I mean by that is that most of its abilities are going to be protecting it instead of dealing high damage. A lot of its weapons are at most mid-range, but it definitely thrives in a more short to melee range kind of army composition. The key thing to know about the Black Grail is their infection markers. Infection markers is similar to blood markers, except every time a unit that has an infection marker activates their turn, they're going to be getting an additional infection marker. You can use the infection markers just like blood markers, it's just an additional accumulated kind of free damage on the unit. This is going to determine a lot about your army's composition, however we'll go into detail later on. Black Grail also has access to Undead Fortitude. Not all of the units have this, but the majority do. This is essentially just an extra layer of armor that all of your troops that have this just get for free, which is really neat. It definitely makes a lot of the troops a lot harder to kill. And for being so tanky, we surprisingly have some of the fastest units in all of the factions. The Black Grail also does have items such as the Compound Eyes Helmet and Devotees to help it with its ranged abilities. So let's go ahead and take a look at our units. The Lord of Tumors has 6 inches of movement, plus 1 dice to range, plus 4 dice to melee, and 0 armor. It does have a pricey cost of 130 ducats, however it does have some pretty neat abilities. First being Beelzebub's Touch, so this is going to be whenever you deal damage with a melee weapon, you're going to be able to give an additional infection marker. That's pretty good. It also has Undead Fortitude, the ability that we mentioned before. Undead Fortitude just means that whenever somebody is going to roll an injury dice on you, they're going to be rolling with -1 dice, which is pretty huge. You're also immune to blood markers caused from the keyword gas, however this does not work against fire weapons, so be careful with anybody with flamethrowers. And classically it does have Tough, Fear, and Strong. Better have Tough for 130 ducats. Now what I really like about this unit, besides on how it looks, is just its Beelzebub's Touch. He used to not be so great though, his abilities were kind of nerfed, but now since the recent updates, he is more viable. However, 130 ducats just for the base of it is a lot. You will be putting most of your eggs in one basket, which is not going to leave a lot of rooms for the rest of your troops. So let's go over the next ones. Next up is the Plague Knight. Their cost is 60 ducats, which is not bad. Their movement is 6 inches, their range is 0, their melee is +2, and their armor is 0. However, they do have a caveat where you do need to have armor on them to be able to deploy them, so standard or reinforced is perfectly fine, but you do need one of those to be able to deploy. The cool thing about the Knights is that they have ranks. You have Knight Companion of the Fly, Knight of the Rotten Cross, and Plague Alamoner. Each of these are really cool in their own aspect depending on what kind of army composition you want, however I do have a clear favorite, which I will reveal at the end. And just like the elites, it has Undead Fortitude, Fear, and Strong. I do like that this can be your leader. For 60 ducats, this does leave a lot of room for the rest of your units in your warband. Next up is the Corpse Guard, which are really cool. For 55 ducats, you have 6 movement, plus 0 range, plus 1 dice melee, and 0 armor. Now this unit is probably the most defensive unit in the Black Grail. It is not strictly focused, but very highly appreciated if you use this as a bodyguard. And with that, it has its ability of bodyguard. If you're within 1 inch of a Black Grail model, you can have the Corpse Guard take the hit instead of the model that they're shooting at. This is pretty neat, because you can completely equip your Corpse Guard with shields and armor and just tank all the hits. The really cool thing about it too is it has Parasitic Tick. Parasitic Tick is whenever you do a melee damage and it deals a blood or infection marker, you can essentially heal. You'll take away one of your own markers, which is so cool. This is definitely a very melee-oriented, defensive-oriented troop, which is really, really cool. And then of course it has Undead Fortitude, which makes it even harder to kill, and Fear, so when you're within melee range, you'll be good to go. Next up is the Hounds of the Black Grails, which are really cool. They cost 55 ducats, and these speedy fuckers can go up to 8 inches. They're not able to shoot, so they don't have a range since they're dogs, and they have +1 dice to their melee. They technically do have 3 abilities, one of them costing 5 ducats and making them deal infection markers instead of blood markers. They also have Undead Fortitude, which is pretty crazy for a dog, but they also have something really cool. This ability right here, Frightening Speed, is fucking awesome. The entire point of these hounds is to get in quick, deal damage, and die. That's it. Now what's pretty insane about this troop too is that it has Disease Carrier. Disease Carrier is just if you're in melee combat with another troop and they activate their model, they get an infection marker. And then naturally it has Fear, which will let it survive a little bit more due to melee weapons. Next up we have the Thralls. Thralls are interesting. The Thrall has 5 movement and -1 to melee. The Fly Thrall has 6 movement, flying, and also -1 to melee. The reason behind being able to choose between a flying and a non-flying is that the non-flying do get undead fortitude and the flying don't. The cool thing about these guys though is that they have overwhelming horde. This just means that if there's a friendly Black Grail model 3 inches from it, it gets +1 dice to its melee. So the more of them there are, the more damage they're each going to be able to do, which is pretty neat. However, this is pretty difficult, especially if somebody just throws a blast weapon in there and kills them. Now the Heralds of Beelzebub are probably one of my favorite models on here. They look pretty fucking insane and super gross. However, they are not tough at all. These flies have +0 range, +0 melee, 0 armor, but they do have 10 fucking movement. That is the highest speed in any of the units in any of the factions, which is crazy. Now for these guys costing 50 ducats, they do have some pretty crazy abilities. First off is Infected Proboscis. Not only is it going to deal infection markers instead of blood markers, it can fight completely unarmed without getting any penalties, but if you deal melee damage, it gets to heal as well, which is pretty damn cool. Next ability is a purchase ability for 10 ducats, which is Maddening Buzz. Maddening Buzz just means that every action that your opponent takes is instead going to be a risky action. 10 ducats, might as well be in there. They also have Toxic, which just means they can't take any gas damage. They also have the Skirmisher ability. Skirmisher just means that if somebody is charging them or they're intercepting a charge, they can then move D3 before the charge happens. This is pretty great, especially for melee-focused enemies. However, if they're just going to shoot it down from the sky, yeah, the best tactic for these guys, go in, infection marker, dash the hell out. Lastly, we have the Amalgam, which is 140 ducats, which is a lot to put in. It has 6 movement, +0 dice to range, +0 dice to melee, and 0 armor. Now, the Amalgam is interesting because at fighting, it sucks. It's awful. However, it tries to make up this with its arms. It has 6 arms, which means you can have 6 one-handed weapons, or 3 two-handed weapons, or any combination. However, this doesn't really make up to hit any target, as they're just a walking mound of flesh that just shoots in the fucking air and misses everything. It does have some really neat abilities, though, to just help it survive and just be annoying and in the way. The main one being Corpulent. Corpulent? Corpulent. This just means that any injury rolls towards the Amalgam are going to be rolled with -2 dice, which is pretty big, especially since this creature also has Tough, so you're going to need to kill it twice. It also has the keyword Toxic, so it can't take damage from gas attacks. It does have a pretty unique ability called Trample, though. Trample just means that if there's a knockdown model that has a 32mm base or lower, you're able to do another free attack on it, but it attacks as though it had a trench club, and it completely ignores armor, which, if you're in that situation, that's really cool. Just another free attack that ignores armor. Perfect. It has Fear, so in melee range, great. And it does have Strong. This means that 2 of its arm can hold a 2-handed weapon in 1 arm, leading to pretty insane combinations. Now, like I said, even though the Amalgam has a bunch of attacks that it can do, it's still not great. It is too many points, in my opinion, to invest in an Amalgam. I love the model. It's incredible. But it's slow. And it's just, I've never been able to find a good use for it. Unless it gets a buff anytime soon, I don't think I'll be putting it in my army any longer. Now let's go into the variants. The variants I actually really like. This gives new rules to the Black Grail, which I think are really neat. First off is the Executor. This is going to make so your leader is a Plague Knight. However, it does gain +1 dice to range and the keyword Tough. This is really cool. For keyword Tough and +1 ranged for 80 ducats, is great. The cool thing about the Dirge is that you are now able to have 3 Plague Knights instead of just 2. It is pretty cool to have 3 different knights, each with its own rank, just be able to do something absolutely wild. Now here's where it starts putting limitation, the Fallen. The Fallen means that you cannot have a Lord of Tumors and you cannot have an Amalgam, which in my opinion is perfectly fine. The Amalgam, I wasn't gonna have it anyways, I don't want it. But the Lord of Tumors is more of a hit depending on the army composition that I want. However, if I'm already putting a bunch of Ducat in the Executor, I'm not going to want another one for the Lord of Tumors. So this is perfectly fine with me. Another limitation is the Lost. This just means that you can only have 2 Heralds of Beelzebub and 2 Hounds, which I'm perfectly fine with. That is typically what I usually run anyways, so no limitations here. I'm okay with that. Next up is kind of a bonus, which is the Bereaved. Bereaved turns the Thralls into something not as bad. The Thralls, both the Grail and the Fly, both get +0 instead of -1 dice to their ranged attacks. The good thing about that is that the Grail Thralls, not the Fly Thralls, but the Grail Thralls can now have ranged weapons. You do get a limitation though of Dishonored, which means nobody can use a Black Grail shield or a Beelzebub's axe, which unfortunately I did like the shield for the Corpse Guard. However, this is a limitation I'll have to take. Lastly is Hegemon's Last Blessing. This gives your warband 3 Plague Blades, 3 Putrid Shotguns, and 3 Viscera Cannons. And non-elites can use those cannons. You also have access to Hegemon's Will, which is on a Plague Knight's turn, you can take an infection marker from your enemy and use it to command a thrall to do whatever, such as move, charge, attack, all that stuff. Now, because of that variation, you also have access to 3 new items, which is the Broken Crown, the Urn, and the Blunderbuss, which are really cool. Now that we have a general idea of what each model does, here's kind of the game plan. Let's say we use this army composition. You have a Lord of Tumors, Plague Knight, Corpse Guard, Hounds, and Heralds of Beelzebub. Now the plan here should be pretty clear. Your Hounds are going to have access to the infection markers, so you're going to be sending them in doing as much infection as they possibly can. Your Heralds should be equipped with something that can also give infection. The Putrid Shotguns are pretty good at that, so go ahead and equip them that, and send them in right after. Your job is to do as much infection as you possibly can on the very first turn. The enemy should then match their turn to try to get rid of those infection sources, because even if they know what the game plan is, trying to get rid of them is their best bet, because the more infection they cause, the more of an annoyance they will be, and the earlier the bloodbath you can absolutely do. Now your Corpse Guard should be used as bodyguards. Bodyguards are going to be the best thing that they can do, especially if you're going to keep them melee range. You can give them ranged weapons if you want, however, melee is pretty good because of their ability to just regenerate health. Have your Corpse Guard move first, and then have your other troops move behind them. That way they're always sticking together. This is essentially going to be a battle of attrition. You're going to be going in, trying to survive as many attacks as you can while giving as many tokens as you can to try to essentially debuff them into being able to attack you. But hold those objectives with the Thralls or any unit that you can, take the hits with the Corpse Guard, infect them, and give them negative dice. That's a pretty good bet. The Plague Knights are going to be one of your most versatile troops, as you can choose its rank. Its rank is going to completely change the aspects of how you're going to want to play the game. Now here's a unit I was mentioning that I find completely insane. First off, we're going to be going with the Dirge variant because of the Executor. The Executor is going to be 80 ducats, it's going to give it +1 on range and tough, and we're going to pick the rank of the Knight of the Rotten Cross because we're going to give it a machine gun. We're going to completely turn this melee beast into a walking ballista. We're going to give it reinforced armor, Compound Eyes helmet, 2 Grail devotees, and the Urn of Bitter Ashes. We're just gonna buff this shit out. And the total cost should be around 255 ducats. It's going to give us this list of abilities. Undead Fortitude, we love. Knight of the Rotten Cross, give it a machine gun, gonna cost us 50 ducats, but we're gonna be able to do insane amount of damage. The Reinforced Armor is gonna give it -2 for its armor. The Compound Eyes helmet is gonna give it +1 to its range, making it a +2 to its range, and each devotee is gonna give it a +1 flat bonus to its injury rolls. This is going to make it an insane walking nightmare. The machine gun is going to allow it to attack 3 different times with +2 range, +2 on its injury rolls. You're going to be taking so many guys out with this. Just try it. It's an absolute nightmare for anybody that comes across it. But thank you guys for watching. This was just a quick overview of the Black Grail to see if it's the right army for you. It's definitely one of my favorite ones. If you have a specific army composition for the Black Grail, please put them in the comments below. I definitely want to check them out. And I want people to be able to reference those lists just to see what's out there and to just make it an easier time for people to try Trench Crusade. But with that, I'll leave it at that. Happy building, happy fighting, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.